Okay, hello everyone. Welcome to the first online meeting of faculty who teach botany. And I am so happy that you are here. And if you don't mind muting yourself until you speak, that would be great. It'll just help us make sure we have a good quality recording. So my name is Jen Wetham. I'm a program administrator at the State Board, and I do faculty professional development. And one thing that we have started doing at the State Board is putting faculty into communities of practice. And the reason we want to do that is because we know that faculty learn best from other faculty. And also because right now there's a potential for people to just reinvent the wheel in every course. And we really don't want you to have to do that. We really want to put you in contact with other faculty so that if you have resources to share, you can. And also if there aren't resources created, that we can come up with a way that they could get created through a more effective sort of crowdsourcing way rather than everybody having to do it all alone. So I'm really excited. I do want to say thanks to Grace Sparks. Hi, Grace.
Hi.
Hi. Grace's dean, Wendy Rockhill, reached out to me and said, can we do something for botany? And I was like, yes, we can. And sometimes I just need a real live human to be like, okay, let's do it. I've got someone and I can say, what time would work for you? So Grace, I want to say thank you to you for kicking this off. I really appreciate you and your leadership. Yeah, it's a leadership move. Get me together with other faculty. Okay, so Lucas Myers is my co-host today, and the first thing that we would like to do is just uncover people's biggest challenges. And right now, labs and lab materials, good suggestions for techniques to teach botany online, especially labs. Sadie is asking for transpiration simulation. Jim asks for suggestions for distance teaching of botany labs. Lisa says ditto on labs, and Grace says labs too. I also want to add to the list of things. Kyle, before we started the meeting, mentioned that students need to be able to learn how to use a microscope. And I know Lucas and I have discussed this with other biology groups, and so I'm wondering, Lucas, would you consider just to kind of, if we could kickstart with what do you find is the general consensus on microscopes right now?
Sorry, my mic was doing some weird stuff. Yeah, the if a learning outcome in your course plan or syllabus is the microscope skill, it makes it a tough. And I imagine in a botany class, maybe dissection scope might be a type of scope that's used as well, or in a lot of the majors biology. So it makes it hard. I think for one part, we have to realize this is in some ways an emergency situation, so we have to find ways to deal with it. There's some really good virtual scopes out there I know that we use for tissues. On the human side, I haven't explored as much for online dissection scopes. That's something I can look into. But there are definitely compound microscopes online where you actually have to learn the magnification, and we can provide links to those if you haven't seen any. That not everything's labeled, where you're actually looking at images. Like, they're actually really, really good. I know for anatomy, I use them for tissues, and they're as good as anything you'd see in the microscope in the lab. And we use them. I use them to teach with a lot of times in class because it is really, really well done. So there's a few of those out there that can be used, but it's about understanding that we're not going to be able to get them in a lab necessarily and have them use the microscope in their hands. So it's about going about other means. And there's some alternatives. There's also ways you can do some at-home microscopes. Microbiology has some things they've done where you can create your own little microscope. It's really cheap and easy to do. And they're able to see like protozoans and some things when they've done those with some wet slides. So I don't know how that would fit in for botany, but it would be something to look at, and we can get those resources as well.
Lucas, thank you so much. Kyle, do you have any follow-up questions or comments on microscopes?
No, I have no follow-ups. I actually do. There's a few programs online that I have found to give them kind of like the virtual tour of a microscope, but that's as far as I've gotten.
Okay, thank you.
And Christy says she'd like that create your microscope at home info. I will get some of that from my colleague Katrina Fuller, and she uses it in her online micro, and I'll make sure we put it in whatever space we decide for you guys to have where you can access it.
Yeah, so one thing before we go further, so Lucas and I have been creating Canvas shells, open Canvas shells for different groups. And at some point today, I would like to show you how we've set up the chemistry one and how we've set up the A&P one to kind of crowdsource information. So for example, like, you know, one of the outcomes being students need to know how to learn and use a microscope. And I recognize that probably isn't how it's phrased. I'm not a scientist, but again, like identifying what are the really core things that we really want students to know and be able to do, and then populating those outcomes with different resources. So I'm seeing that I think Sadie asked for a transpiration simulation, and Lisa Carlson has already posted adaptation of a transpiration lab, and it's a YouTube video, or no, it's not a YouTube video, but it takes an existing lab, shares instructions and data. And Grace says, I have loads of transpiration data from previous quarters experiments that I'd be happy to share so the students can analyze real results. Is there anything else around transpiration? It sounds like transpiration is another maybe central learning outcome. So are there other folks who have things to add about transpiration? What are some other topics? So we've got microscopes so far that people have asked about. We've got transpiration. What else? What are some other kind of outcomes or content or learning things, I believe is the technical term. What are some other learning things that you are anxious about or trying to resource? Christy says, identification of plants, keying out using a dissecting scope. Before we move on to field labs, what do people have to say about identification of plants keying out using the dissecting scope?
I'm at Green River. This is my first year, so I'm new. But we added a 10 times magnification hand lens to their list of supplies so that they can, if they can access a plant, still be able to examine it at home. So that's one of the things that we've got planned. We haven't started any of those activities yet, but we did tell our students to buy a small dissecting kit and a lens so that they can do that.
How much, what's the price point on that?
Amazon had some for about $10 a kit and $10 a lens, with a light and everything, so that they didn't have to worry about illuminating the plant specimen as well.
Christy Welch is asking, can I get the exact details for that lens and the kit?
We didn't specify a specific lens. We just said it had to have at minimum 10 times magnification. But I can find the links for the ones that we identified working with Danny Nahara when we set this up. So I will go find those.
And thank you so much. And if we do create a Canvas shell, if this is something that people want to do, Stephanie, if you would be willing to share kind of the materials around this, like the assignments and.
I can do that. We haven't made any of them yet. We've been trying to front load labs that don't require them to have their materials yet because we're having delays. So they're not getting their books, they're not getting their Amazon deliveries. So we gave them a lab using the Burke herbarium pictures. I see Christy getting excited. So we did that, and we had them just looking at classification and looking at how to identify authors and things like that. So that was our first. So once we have something, yeah, I'd be happy to share what we develop.
Christy just wrote, "I'm doing that." and something that Lucas and I have suggested to the chemistry faculty is, and to the A&P faculty, is that maybe we start to parse that out. So maybe like if you and Christy are doing the same thing, maybe you could be like, okay, I'll take care of writing the instructions for this, and you could write the instructions for that. So I think there might be a way to kind of spread the work out a little bit. And also if other folks want to get in on that, we could.
Yeah, Danny Nahara is teaching 2 sections and I'm teaching the other 2, and we're basically trading off writing quizzes, writing assignments. He's taught this before, so he's got the labs kind of under control, but he has some very fancy camera equipment. And so we originally were going to have some phenology built in for like 10% of their grade. And so instead of sending students outdoors, he is putting together these immersive, kind of like when you use the navigate on Google Maps, where you can like turn around and see 360 around you, look up, look down. And then he's tagging specific plants and then putting close-ups of them so they can still see, this is what the flower looks like, this is what the stem looks like, these are what the leaves look like. So he's got some fancy tech that he's working through. And so he's planning to still be able to send students pictures of plants through development stages, potentially even a digital field trip, looking at a different ecosystem and the plants in it. So I'll check with him and see if he's okay with sharing that out as well.
That would be awesome. Thank you so much. And I think Sadie has something to contribute. Sadie, I know you posted it to the chat, but I also saw your hand raised. Do you want to share?
Yeah, I mean, because we've already, you know, we're finishing up week 1, so we have taken, so we basically photocopied modified a part of Pojar McKinnon's dichotomous key for the conifers, and then we took a bunch of pictures. So we took like 4 pictures for each tree, so like a profile, a close-up, a closer up, and then cones. And then we're going to have students try to use the key to identify these unknowns, and that it's really low tech, but we're hoping it gets some of the ideas across.
Sadie, I just want to reinforce that this morning I had a diversity, equity, and inclusion meeting on COVID-19, and definitely I think there's a lot of students who are experiencing financial hardship right now, students who don't have access to high-speed internet, and so I think low tech right now is so equitable, and it's very compassionate, and so I just wanted to say low tech is great. So one thing, Lucas, you put in a comment about bud burst. Is that related to keying out?
Yeah, it's just I haven't used it. I've been doing some research this morning because I don't teach botany. It would just seem to be a unique platform where you could kind of create your own observation, do some key work around plants. I don't know if it would be useful. I just threw it in there to see if anybody had used it. It seems to be used in classrooms. I don't know how much it's used. So I just threw that in there to see if anybody had used that or heard of that.
So we'll pause and just ask, I'm seeing Jennifer shake her head. No, you can shake your head, or has anyone used bud burst?
I do a winter quarter activity where I have my students look for a hazelnut shrub, because you can find them, you can identify them winter just from the little catkins. And so they do that plant specifically in winter. I don't do a lot with it, but there's obviously a whole lot of activity going on right now. One of the things I've sort of learned from various meetings that we've all had with each other is that teaching botany in a small college like Centralia in Lewis County versus if you're in Seattle or Tacoma or a more urban place, there's a lot of variation in what your students can find to observe. I tried to teach this activity in Tacoma once, and my students couldn't find hazelnuts there.
Oh, fascinating.
But I think there would be a lot of allow opportunity to use Budburst.
Thank you for that. And Lisa, just out of curiosity, if I'm understanding you right, like, so you used Budburst to help, you know, with the specific of hazelnuts in winter quarter, is that right?
Correct.
Okay. How did it, so do you think that, you know, instructors kind of modifying it with different plants might be a good tool to use at this time?
Yeah, there are tons of plants doing tons of different things now. So, you know, for winter quarter, you know, it's very, very limited in what kind of activity the plants are doing. And that's just one that, well, that worked really well and is pretty easy to find in our area. There'd be lots of other options, and it would, you know, if students are doing it on their own, it would be a matter of being able to verify that they've found the correct species at an early stage, and that they would be able to track it to identify what they're actually looking for.
Is there a cost for Budburst?
No.
Okay. So thank you. This is all very, very helpful. I'm wondering if we want to move on to another topic. So far we've covered microscopes, transpiration simulation, and we've also talked a little bit about, well, maybe more than a little bit about identification of plants keying out. So what about field labs? Jennifer Floyd would like some thoughts about, she says, I'm planning to video myself unless you have other ideas. How are folks thinking? Jennifer, do you want to kick us off? Do you want to talk a little bit about what you're thinking about doing with field labs?
Well, we have some preset labs where we were going out on campus from the lab during their lab time and using trees on campus and things like that to help them understand the difference between mosses, ferns, gymnosperms, angiosperms, and just kind of those basic characteristics. But I'm going to have to send them out on their own to do that. So I was planning to just sort of walk around my yard or my neighborhood or wherever and use my video and show them this is what it is. Now go find your own kind of thing, unless you have other ideas.
Jennifer, thank you. Thank you. So what do folks have to say in response? Christy writes, that's what I'm doing.
I'm going to do mine entirely online. So that's where I'm going to be relying on Danny and his fancy cameras to put something together for my students. Because he has like the 360 cameras, the 3D cameras, all of that. So mine will be completely digital by the end of the quarter.
Thank you. And again, if you could speak to Danny, if he is willing to share those, you know, maybe even under a Creative Commons license, and if we could, again, I don't want to infringe on his creative in any way, but if he is willing to share them, I think there's lots of people who would appreciate that.
I'll send him a message.
Thank you. Thank you. So Christy is saying that's what I'm doing. And she said, we're rural, so I'm asking them to go for walks and post whatever they can find. Christy, can you say a little bit more about that? Or would you like to say a little bit more about that?
Sure. I just used the discussion boards under Canvas, and I made a post. I asked each student to start a thread where they post daily. I asked them to go for as many walks as they can because we're rural. So, and you know, every week or every day, see if they can find a plant, take a picture of it, identify the zone, use Burke's Museum, and then I posted Weeds of the West, the link to Weeds of the West, because it's a free download. And then I trying to get them to use Weeds of the West. Since I didn't have a chance for everybody to pick up our, well, we've been using the Hitchcock. We've been using the Flora of the Northwest, but we can't do that. I feel like it's too complicated. So I've just been trying to make it simple so that they can use the Burke's Museum link and Weeds of the West and whatever they have to figure out what the plant is, and then post it, and then we make comments and talk about it. So then I have each student making a collection on their thread each day. So they're adding a picture to their thread. And then I'm commenting on it and trying to talk about what they're finding. I don't know if that makes sense. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, yeah. And I'm just wondering too if I know you mentioned discussion boards. And so again, I just want to encourage you, like, I think that would be a really great thing to add to the Canvas shell. If this group decides they want a Canvas shell, would you be willing to share that with the Canvas shell?
Sure. Well, sure. It's not very, yeah, it's very simple, I can at least write down what I've done.
I think simple right now is excellent, and again, like Lucas and I have had this conversation with a lot of different STEM faculty recently. Like, done is better than perfect, and if people can just even the bare gist of what you did, I think is enough to give people some. Oh, I could, like it's that what I could do based on what you've done. So I think if you don't mind sharing that, that would be awesome.
Yeah, I also have made one video of myself where I went on a walk, and my son actually did the little video, and I pointed out the plant and all the things they would look for, and then I posted that, and I've been wanting to do more of those, and then I just have like a plant of the day, and I'm trying to say, see if you can find this one, because we're in the same habitat, so hopefully, and some of them have. I've posted 4 weeds that are very common, and so people are excited. Oh, I found all 4 of them, so.
I like the way that you not only are showing your students who you are and they're getting that sense of who you are as an instructor, but also that almost gamification, like I found all 4, I think it can be very motivating. So this is excellent. Thank you so much for sharing, Christy. I think Grace Sparks has something to contribute. Grace, do you want to tell us what you're thinking about and working on right now?
So we had scheduled an in-person field trip to a local pea patch, so in Seattle. And that was happening after the stay-at-home order and classes had stopped. So I had the students, I changed it. I gave them links to both the Department of Neighborhood's pea patch website and the City Parks website, which both have places where you can enter, find a park near me or find a pea patch near me, and had each of the students do their own little isolated field trip. But I did want to point out that I did have to do modified assignments because there were 2 students who were so concerned about transmission risk that they were not leaving their houses at all. They were not stepping outside. So, and those are students who are taking a botany class. So definitely something to keep in mind that could happen with some of your students this quarter too.
Grace, thank you for letting us know that. It does feel important to have alternatives for students who maybe are immunocompromised and literally cannot leave their house. And Stephanie is writing, that's why I'm doing entirely online. And she has a student who went home to Singapore. So yeah, so thank you. And thanks for sharing.
Jen, I think something to bring up for Grace and Christy mentioned is the idea that simple with high quality and flexibility is going to be really important this whole quarter. So don't get overwhelmed that you got to create something immaculate and complex, and instead simplifying things with high quality is going to be the best way to go. And I think Grace and Christy have 2 good examples there, and I see some other ones that have been posted in the chat as well. So I think you guys are all doing some good things and on the right track for sure.
Thanks, Lucas. Lucas, I think you accidentally muted again. Oh.
I'm there. I'm unmuted now.
I don't know. I'm so sorry. I feel like it's probably my fault. It's probably a Zoom thing. So sorry about that. So Woody Moses is attempting a pet plant project. Woody, do you want to share with us a little bit about what you're doing right now?
Oh, sure. This is something that it's basically when we would meet on campus, the students would just, find one plant at the beginning of the quarter, and then we'd go back and revisit it several times throughout the quarter. And they would document its change and growth over time, its classification, maybe interactions it has with other species and that sort of thing. So I thought it might be the sort of thing that they could do on their own. I understand that some folks aren't leaving where they live, their homes, their apartments. And so I said, hey, if it's just something in your apartment, that'd be cool. You know, what it's sort of inspired me to do though is I've sort of created a little blog on Canvas. I'm watching my apple tree bloom right now and go through its, you know, its changes and everything. And so I'm sort of posting that and using it as a guide for the students so they can see what I'm looking for. And then at the end of the quarter, I'm just asking them to make a PowerPoint presentation about it. And yeah, we'll see how it goes. I have no idea how this is going to go.
Pedagogically, it sounds like it's going to go great. I really like the idea of, I like your catchy title, and also that you're modeling it for the students, and that I think that'll be really helpful. It sounds like a great idea.
Yeah, thanks.
I'm doing something.
Go ahead, sorry.
I'm doing something similar, but so I don't model it for them, and I'm just calling it spring to summer, and I'm having them go out and find something. I've given them some suggestions of plants that will work. And first, I don't know enough to actually watch go from bloom to at least starting to make fruit. And of course, blackberries are excellent salmon berries. So I've just given them some thoughts. And some are just doing, have gone out and gotten small tomato plants. So, and if anybody really can't do it at all, I will just come up with some that can do it totally visually by looking up the plants. And we are sending out magnifying lenses too. So it's, really the focus is on looking at a flower develop, but they're supposed to be taking pictures of the whole plant. And I told them they can do it as a poster, you know, they can upload, or PowerPoint also. So it sounds very similar, but yeah, just try to go from flower to fruit.
I think, Dale, thank you so much for contributing this. And I think to Dale, Woody, you know, folks who are creating assignments like this, if we do create a Canvas shell, if you would be willing to share these, I think just, again, you can kind of get ideas from each other's assignments. And I would also be happy if anyone wants, I geek out on assignment design. So if anyone wants me to help you tilt them, I would be so excited. So Lisa is sharing that she has a tree adoption assignment for students, and they're going to follow a tree through the quarter. And Stephanie Hoffman is, it sounds like you guys are doing a similar one. Yeah, we're doing My Native Plant. Stephanie, do you want to share a little bit about what you wrote in the chat?
Sure. So we decided we're still going to try to push them to interact with their classmates, and most of them are students that we've had, you know, since fall for 211 and 212. And so we're still gonna, they can do their own final product if they want to, so that we don't have major group breakdowns. But we want them to work in groups, so that way they can subdivide the work between both identifying structures, creating a guide to like how you would identify this plant if you encountered it. So what are the key structures you're looking for? We are having them use plant identification books like Flora of the Northwest, and we also have a wildflower book just for Green Rivers campus that they can use. And then they'll label the structures, they will find information about like what kind of conditions do you find this plant in. So who is it coexisting with, who is it interacting with, what are the requirements for it. And then we're giving them a list of ecosystem services and asking them, does your plant, which of these can your plant serve? And trying to push them to be a little creative about what are the uses for some of these plants potentially. And then we're giving them options. So their finished product could be a presentation. They could produce like a kid's book if they wanted to do drawings, because in 212 with zoology, we had them drawing their dissections out. And then they could also make a Minecraft level. This was, again, Danny's contribution, since he thinks that a lot of them would be interested in potentially doing it that way, so that they have some choices in how they present their final product.
I love this. And Stephanie, I just want to say really quickly, I love that you're doing universal design for learners in terms of the assessment, and that students get to choose. That seems like a really great thing to bake in. Yeah, exciting project. Jennifer Floyd. So actually, I guess for people, so Lisa has posted, and I read that one, but Lisa, if you'd like to speak to that. Jennifer Floyd has a contribution, Roshni, um, Barbara Blackie. So I guess maybe if folks have typed into the chat, especially if you haven't had a chance to talk yet, go ahead and take the mic.
Well, I could say very briefly about mine. When I teach dendrology, focus on trees, I have them choose a tree at the beginning of the quarter and just make a journal of all their observations for the quarter. I have a bunch of intermediate assignments with a report at the very end. So the report ultimately will be a description of the phenology that they've observed, plus some research, and then another intermediate assignment of doing some measurements of the tree. So, getting tree height by trigonometry and things like that.
Awesome. Way to contextualize the math stuff too.
Yeah, and they use it they can do it in their backyard pretty easily.
This is great. One thing, it's 2:30, and so I think we've got a lot of ideas here, and I'm really excited about it. I did want to draw attention to something that Holly Ferguson wrote in the chat, that she can share what she did for a lab manual and what I'm planning to do with a fruit science class. And Holly, I definitely think, especially if you could focus on lab manuals, I think that would be helpful right now.
Sure. Looks like I'm unmuted. All right, and I think I could probably share that lab manual. There's nothing private in there. So I teach Introduction to Plant Science, and also another course is the Introduction to Fruit Science. In the Introduction to Plant Science, we cover, it's a survey class, and we cover everything from soup to nuts with the plants, And so we're doing botanical things as well as, going down and into the nitty gritty and looking at the insides of the plant and understanding how the plant functions. So the physiological labs, where we're studying osmosis and photosynthesis, those are probably going to be demos that I'm going to Zoom or YouTube. I'm not sure how for that, but all the others, like the planting plants and seed germination, I said, well, wait a minute, they can do all these at home. So I set up, it took me a long time, but I gathered supplies from various stores, and I got reimbursed for all that, thank goodness. But and then made bags up for the students, and they picked them up using social distancing protocols and all that. And so that now they have a bag of supplies, and they'll use those as they are needed for each lab. So this week, in addition to, we're having a plant growth project for the whole class. So I divided the class into three, and each, so there were 3 different soil types, and there were 10 seed types. So, well, about 10, there were 9 seed types. And so 3 students in theory are planting the same seed type, but in a different soil type. And they'll follow these plants for 6 weeks. Any longer than 6 weeks, the plants get ready to be transplanted. They get really big sometimes. And so the 3 different soil types I've got, as an example, Miracle Grow potting soil, silt loam, which I got out of my backyard, and the other one is another professional potting mix with mycorrhizae in it. So they're learning about the mycorrhizae. Well, you got natural fungi that are helping the roots and the plants in the soil, but this is actually, mycorrhizae that they put into the potting mix. So they'll get to learn about mycorrhizae along the way as well. The other parts of the labs, let's see, we got germination experiments, and they can do those between 2 moist paper towels. you know, so they've got things at home and they'll just, you know, look at the YouTube and follow the directions. And sometimes there's going to be pictures from the internet that I sourced that they'll label, and they'll fill out the lab manual. And I said, well, fill it out and I will just ask for it periodically so I can check to see if you've gotten all the labs done. So it's a lab manual, and it's basically you're filling it out, you know. So, and for the plant growth experiment, that's going to be a discussion board, and they will post progress reports weekly, and then they'll interact with 3 other students. So that's a 10-point assignment every week.
Holly,
And
people are like, I want to see your lab manual. Give me the lab manual.
So I'm super excited about that. I don't know about you know, this is the first time I've ever tried this. And I told them to refrigerate the fruits and veggies that they got. And I realized that the yellow squash isn't going to make it. So the yellow squash doesn't have a very good shelf life this time of year. It's just, yeah, it just got mushy. And I couldn't get the cucumbers that I wanted, because the cucumbers would have been better. Anyway.
Hey, Holly, Grace has a question, and I think maybe this is something that everybody could talk about for a minute. So I know that I've heard this from a lot of different faculty that her institution said faculty and lab staff were not permitted to put together kits of supplies for students. Yeah,
we were allowed, yeah.
Okay. Are there other folks who have experienced restrictions on not being able to send kits to students?
I have no idea. I mean, I did have to clear it through my dean and through the vice president, and security was informed as well.
Okay.
We had to, yeah. But my Jeremy Bugie, who teaches plant science and other plant-related biology courses, he said something about how he wanted to get kits together, but he was too late. So his dean is a different dean than my dean. So I don't know. You know, we kind of worked it out, and we had a very short window of time when they could come on campus, and most students were able to pick the supplies up during that time.
Right. And Stephanie just posted and said, I can't ask students to leave the house at all. So even picking up supplies is out. And Cliff writes, we had to have them prepared and delivered to our library, which acted as the sole distribution point. At Cascadia, it looks like we can do kit pickups, but not all my students are local, so we're not doing kits. And Dale said same. So one thing, it's 2:39, and one thing I would like to ask is, would folks be interested in a Canvas shell to share resources with each other? Great, because I created you one. Look, there it is. And so what I need from you is, if you would like to be added to this Canvas shell, then if you could type your email into the chat, and then I can add everyone. And one thing that Lucas and I are learning through working with these different groups is that it's helpful if the course has some organizing principles rather than just, you know, kind of dumping things into a shell. And so, like, some of the things I've picked up now is that microscopes, transpiration, like in the chat, like I think the way that we've structured the discussion, you guys have been awesome, because it feels like it's a little bit easier to kind of find what the organizing principles are. But what are some other topics that people are interested in kind of resourcing around? I've thrown out microscopes, not microphones, transpiration. What else?
Natural selection.
Okay.
Photosynthesis, that's a good one.
Yeah. Did anybody have any good slides of plant tissues that you found online that are high quality. That is something I was desperately looking for. And whenever I look at these, they are not the resolution that would be helpful. That would help.
I'll look around. I feel like I did find a good site, but it might take some digging.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
A site that I
We do have at Olympic College, our lab tech is making a whole bunch of tissue slides, and they're going to be posted in a common Canvas shell. So I can share that somehow. I'll figure out how.
Jennifer, if you need any help, we can help you. And also I'm very close with Martin Cockcroft and Christy Fierro, so I'm sure that they could help, or
Yeah,
Kathy.
they made our Canvas shell, so it's there somewhere.
All right, we can work it out. We can help you, no problem.
I don't have the link readily to hand, but a site that I've always used that has really good resolution images is I believe it's called the Virtual Foliage homepage. It's the University of Wisconsin's Botany Department. I can find the link and send that.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thanks. Yeah.
Hey, Jen. I just
hey,
wanted
Lucas.
to jump in. I've been listening and writing notes down. And I posted in the chat there just some categories, and they may not be content specific, but these seem like areas where everybody's got some good ideas and areas where you're still working on putting things together. So if people liked those, we could create modules around those topics, and people could post some of the assignments and activities they've already created, and we can continue to build. And as we get more in there, others or I can also organize around some of that content under those specific categories. So if we have multiple areas under, field trips / walkarounds, or however we want to name that, we can content organize it within that module. But those seem to be some of the key areas where I saw everybody discussing. So it'd be interesting to hear what people's thoughts were on those.
Sounds good.
Yeah, it sounds like I love the idea, Lucas. I like these categories. I guess I want to ask, in the time we have left, what would be the best use of this time? What are things that folks are? So I guess maybe one thing I would like to ask is, once the Canvas shell is open and you're populated into it, does everybody have at least one thing they feel like they could contribute to the Canvas shell?
Yes.
Awesome. So Cliff wrote keying of plants. Oh, and Barbara, assessment. Yes, absolutely. So Lucas, so I'm thinking those might be added to modules, maybe?
Yeah, I put those down there. We could probably put plant identification and keying in the same module. They're connected there, but assessment's always a good one. I think right now, especially going online, everybody's trying to figure out how they're doing assessments, or if they're doing maybe project-based assessments, if they're doing tests. And that may be a good conversation for right now.
Yeah.
These last 15 minutes, if people have questions around assessment.
Let's have it. Hey, Barbara, do you want to ask your question, or do you want to? I know that you're offering it as a module, but what are you thinking about right now with assessment?
I am just, I actually just came up today because people are worried that going online, there would, you have to do your assessments differently. So I'm just wondering how people are modifying their assessments, and if they found things that worked better than other things. So I think Lucas already mentioned, maybe going more to projects and less towards, more formal assessment type assignments. So, but it's, just thinking about that shift.
Yeah, so how I know with the with the other groups of STEM faculty, I think we've discussed the state board has purchased Honor Lock, and some schools use Respondus Lockdown for high stakes exams. I do think that I'll just say from an equity perspective, if folks are willing, if you can shift away from high stakes exams at this time and use other kinds of assessment, I think that's a more equitable strategy. Lucas and I were talking to, I think, a biology faculty member who was watching her students with Respondus Lockdown, and like a smoke alarm went off. Another student, like a kid, ran in and she was like, I just have 10 more questions. Can you just wait until I answer these 10 questions? And so I think for a lot of our students, taking a test or an exam is going to be really difficult. And so if you can do other kinds of assessments.
Sorry. I've been teaching online for some years now, and I actually tell the students just to make themselves a cheat sheet that they can use while they're taking the exam, because I'm not looking over their shoulder. And for me, the goal is for them to study and learn. And I figure if they've spent the time to sit down and go through and write out all their notes on another piece of paper, and that helps them get a little more credit, then sweet, it's really, I've had like no issues since then. And I still time the exams. I still say, it's an hour long.
Yeah, Woody, I think that's a great method for still doing exams in that way. I know in my anatomy physiology courses, I face-to-face and online, I allow notes. One, it just eases stress so they can actually use their brain. And so I think that's a good method to go if you're still going to use your traditional testing type formats online for sure. Yeah, I think that's good, Woody. Thanks for sharing.
Yeah, thank you. Stephanie writes, we're doing half MC and half open book, open resource, free response questions. And Christy writes, I'm trying to use more short-timed Canvas quizzes. Roshni is doing the same thing as Woody. Holly has a suggestion to always use a scoring rubric. Holly, do you want to talk a little bit about how you're using scoring rubrics?
Well, I use the rubrics in Canvas, and I make them very specific. So like, for example, if I have a worksheet that has open-ended questions, I make them, with a rubric, I can make them objective, because I can, really boil it down to them, what I'm looking for. And so they can essentially look at that scoring rubric and score their own assignment, their own written assignment, and, go for the gold, by looking at the specific criteria that the teacher is asking for. So especially where the worksheets and the article reviews, well, I say, well, who wrote this article and what journal was it in? 1 point for each one of those. So, make it very, very specific so that they know their expectations.
Would you be willing to share some of yours with the Canvas shell?
Sure.
Yay. I think it's always helpful to see other examples, and then you can always just, kind of tweak it or modify it. Thank you.
Plus, it always makes it a lot easier to grade, especially with all the written assignments, having to read all that. And I usually don't look at the English writing skills unless it's a really long paper. then that's on the criteria. So yeah, and I just mark the errors with the marker in Canvas and count them up, and so that, I don't try to correct their English writing. That's not my job. I'm a content teacher. So, but I still think that they should write well, considering even at a 200 level. That's what we're trying to produce here. We're trying to produce students who can write as they go out into the work world.
Thank you so much, Holly. Thank you. So there's a conversation in the chat between Cliff and Stephanie. So I think they're going to try to possibly make a bank or making yeah, just so I think too, like just if folks are willing to share that to the Canvas shell and we can kind of crowdsource efforts like this, that would be awesome. These kinds of collaborations would be great. Thank you. What else? Anything else? Does anyone have a burning question about what they're going to do this week that we can help with?
Well, I do have one. I'm curious as to other folks' experiences with videoing. You know, I used my iPad to do some videos and uploaded them to a YouTube account and then provided the link to the students. And as long as the video is, you know, no more than like 8 minutes, it works okay. But they tend to get to be enormous files, and you can't upload them at all if they get to be too lengthy. I mean, we're not talking really long, so I'm not sure how people are doing that. Are they just accepting a low resolution and filming them at a low resolution?
What are folks doing for video?
Nobody is doing it. YouTube searches. Oh, the phone might be a good. Yeah, I should probably use my phone.
Yeah, and
I use my.
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead.
No, you go.
I use my phone. I'm a step behind Holly, so I've been experimenting using my phone. I brought the video into Screencast-O-Matic and tried to cut out things to make it shorter. Okay. But from my phone to Screencast-O-Matic to Canvas, the files came in gigantic, and it worked better to go to YouTube.
Yeah.
That actually YouTube seems to, until I learned how to shoot them, YouTube actually seemed to bring in a smaller file. So until I learned how to use those things. So we use Screencast-O-Matic with Western Washington, and then Panopto with Peninsula College. So both of those seem to work about the same, but I'm just learning, you know, how to deal with those, the file storage. The nice thing about Panopto is it stays on Panopto, so it doesn't clog up your computer or YouTube. But yeah, storage is a challenge. And I would love to hear what other people are. I'm sure there's a lot of people way ahead of me.
So one thing I would, oh, sorry, go ahead. Roshni?
Roshni is my name.
Oh, Roshni, I'm so sorry. Yes, Roshni, okay. So sorry.
Most Americans say Roshni. Yeah, so my students did not like my Panopto videos. They prefer the YouTube videos because I think they're more exciting, I guess. I don't have the ability to make them exciting. But when I look for specific videos on various topics like simple versus complex tissues, I find the videos on YouTube equally boring. So if anybody has access to exciting plot videos, I would love you to share that. And I want to add one more thing. So at Bellevue College, our class started this week, and I asked students why they were taking the class. 90% of them wanted to learn to grow food.
Oh.
Yeah, so I had anticipated that, but also that's my interest because I'm an agronomist. So I put up a fun video about apocalypse gardening, and they get a choice about how to grow food in an actual garden, on their deck, on a windowsill. And it was kind of interesting. They seemed very responsive to that. I don't know how it will go. I can tell you in a few weeks, but I can't tell you now. So we'll see how it goes.
Can I just say how much I love that you asked the students why they're taking the course and then you contextualized assignments for them? Like that's a genius move.
Well, I was just anticipating that, but also that's my interest because of my training in agronomy. So I was just hoping that people were into growing food as much as I was. And it worked out. So it was just a lucky guess.
That's pretty cool though. I really love that. Thanks for sharing. So there's a couple other comments in the chat about videos. One thing I did want to say, Lucas Meyer's colleague, Katrina Fuller, did a lifeboat strategy session for STEM folks, and she talked about just recording a PowerPoint. So making a slide deck and recording a PowerPoint, and it's very low tech. And so it doesn't require a lot of bandwidth, and the students can watch it easily, and you can still upload it to YouTube. And so I think, and Lucas, I feel like you might want to say a few words to this, but students are not going to watch a long lecture. And so the ACUE, I don't know how to pronounce that acronym, but they have a series on micro lectures, and I'm happy to share that in the Canvas shell, but I would go short, and with a corresponding assessment. Lucas, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I think short, chunked material, however you need to design it out, is good, especially with videos. It also gives people the time to watch something. And a lot of videos that are 10 minutes long that are already done, not even maybe ones you're doing, have a ton of information in them. You know, it's so much different recording a video lecture versus lecturing in a class, right? There's a lot of pauses and different things that occur in a classroom versus when you're just doing a lecture, we tend to fill up more space. Sometimes even talk faster, cover more material. So in 8 or 9 minutes, you can actually cover a ton of information. And so you have to take all those things into consideration. And I would always say doing those PowerPoints and things are good. You could probably get the same out of just putting a PowerPoint on there if you're going to read it that way. But that's my own personal opinion on the PowerPoint videos. But there's also really well done videos out there already if you can find some. That are already closed captions, those things. And then the other one is there's a way to do it with Panopto where you can make it so they can actually download it and watch it offline. You can use Panopto recordings or in a variety of different record systems so that they can actually download it off the internet and have it on their computer to watch it when they're, and it doesn't require the internet. Because we know we're going to run into all those issues. And I would just say anytime you're making videos, try to find alternative ways to provide that information. Because they may not be able to watch the videos this spring, especially with the amount of people that are going to be using all of these services every day.
Yeah. Well, everyone, it is 3 o'clock almost, and so I did want to say thank you so much for your time today. And this group is great. It sounds like you are really ahead of the game on about 900 things, and I'm really impressed. And thank you for all you're doing for our students during this time. I think the other thing that Lucas and I have been saying to a lot of faculty is done is better than perfect, and do not kill yourself. Like, do not overload your students with work. Don't overload yourself with work. You know, like less is more. I feel like I have a lot of cliches here, like quality, not quantity. Less is more. It's so again, like low stakes, asynchronous. Be kind to yourself during this process. Lucas, anything else you want to add?
No, I was super. I actually want to go get my own classes after hearing all the great ideas and things that this group has going. It inspired me. All of your students are going to be very well versed in a lot of cool activities and intrigued all quarter, I imagine, after hearing all the cool things you guys are doing. So keep it up.
I know. I want to take all your classes. I just want to quit my job and just do nothing but take classes from all of you. So thanks, everyone. I'm going to stop the recording.